give the floor to Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Singapore.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, I'm afraid I have to give a contrary opinion, but I'm encouraged by the invitation by the Foreign Minister of Italy to reach out to those who hold a different position and to promote a debate at all levels. And I hope to contribute to that debate. I think our starting shared position has to be that all human life is sacred. I think that's something which, whether you're an abolitionist or retentionist, I think that's a common position that we can all share and start from. Hence, our paramount objective must be to protect all human life, despite the fact that we live in a very imperfect world. And as my colleague from Switzerland has said, it's a complex world. The challenge is, how do we do this? How do we protect all human life, despite the fact that we live in an imperfect, complex world? That's the challenge, but the immediate question that confronts all of us, both within and without this room, is whether the death penalty, in the proper context and in strictly limited circumstances, plays any role in protecting the sanctity of life. So I want to focus on this question, whether the death penalty, in the proper context and in strictly limited circumstances, plays any role in protecting the sanctity of lives in our societies. And because this is the United Nations, which by definition recognizes diversity and recognizes the sovereign rights of states to exercise that sovereignty in pursuit of their people's welfare, I think this debate within the United Nations, or as a side event of the United Nations, is very appropriate. I have therefore listened to the views that have been shared so far very carefully and with deep respect, because all of you have walked this very painful journey. But I want to quote from my predecessor, Minister Shanmugam, who in a similar event 2 years ago said, and I want to quote, "To portray the debate as simply one of taking lives versus not taking lives is a straw man argument. No civilized society can glorify in the taking of life. The question is whether, in very limited circumstances, it is legitimate to have the death penalty so that the larger interests of society is served." Unquote. Added to this is the fact that the rights of the offenders must always be weighed against the rights of their victims and their families and the broader rights of the community and society to live in peace and security. So therefore, we need a more balanced, a broader assessment of the issue at hand, and we have to take into account the different perspectives and the facts on the ground. In Singapore, where I come from, the death penalty remains on our statute books. But it is applied only and strictly in the context of an unwavering commitment to the rule of law. In fact, you could argue that a prerequisite is an unwavering commitment to the rule of law resting on a strong and independent judiciary. There must be fair, transparent laws and due process, because otherwise you will end up with situations like what Mr. Edward Mpagi has gone through. But the way we have implemented our judicial system in Singapore has been pivotal in our efforts to foster a peaceful, a safe, a harmonious, and inclusive society. Murder and drug trafficking cause enormous harm to society. Capital punishment is carried out only after due judicial process and in accordance with law. As a result, for what it is worth, I can stand here and tell you that Singapore is one of the safest countries in the world. Our residents, including women and children, can go anywhere they please, freely and without fear, at any time of the day or night. The Singapore government therefore takes our responsibilities for the safety and security of our citizens very, very seriously. The types of crime for which the death penalty is applied is a matter for individual states to decide based on your own national circumstances. I'm not here to preach or to prescribe to other states who have your own circumstances. What constitutes a most serious crime must be examined contextually in terms of its impact on the immediate and third-party victims, as well as on society at large. For example, Singapore regards drug trafficking as a most serious crime. Singapore is a densely populated city-state with a large numbers of people moving across our borders every single day. We are situated in a region with major drug production and trafficking centers, putting us at the forefront of the struggle against drugs. Drugs, and I can speak here as a physician, drugs have a devastating impact on the individuals, on their families, and on the societies. Globally, there were over 207,000 drug-related deaths in 2014. These are just death. The number of people who have suffered injury, families that have suffered grave misfortune, young adults who have been deprived of the opportunity to fulfill their potential is several orders of magnitude larger than 200,000 per year. According to the UNODC, the average homicide rate in 2013 was 6.2 per 100,000 population. That same year, the homicide rate in Singapore was 0.21 per 100,000. In our view, and we humbly submit it for your consideration, capital punishment for drug-related offenses and for murder has been a key element in keeping Singapore drug-free and keeping Singapore safe. Singapore is probably one of the few countries in the world which has successfully fought this drug problem. And we do not have slums, we do not have ghettos, we do not have no-go zones for the police. The death penalty has deterred major drug syndicates from establishing themselves in Singapore, and we have successfully kept the drug situation under control. I must also add that whilst there may be many countries who are in favor of abolition, we do not, as of now, have international consensus for or against the death penalty when it is imposed according to the due process of law. There are no major international treaties that proscribe the imposition of the death penalty. Every state has a sovereign right, indeed a sovereign duty, to decide for itself what works and to take into account its own circumstances. In Singapore, there is very high levels of support on the part of our people for the death penalty to remain on our books. But we do not take this support for granted, and from time to time we will continue to review our legislation and make changes according to our circumstances. This debate is a heated, painful, and emotional one. But I just ask members who are represented on the floor today to respectfully reflect on the views expressed, the diversity of the circumstances, and the impact on the ground. And to give to each state its sovereign right to choose the most appropriate judicial approach so that we can adopt a more balanced perspective on this complex issue. I thank you for allowing me to share my contrarian views. Thank you.